In today's podcast of Data for All, how is data captured? Where is it stored? And most importantly, who owns it?
Pro tip, it's not you.
Welcome to the Data for All podcast. I'm Charlie Apigian.
And I'm Charlie Yielding, where we want to empower you to think different with data.
So, and to empower you to think different with data, today what we're going to focus on is data on where it is stored, how it is captured, and the one that really gets us is who owns it. And I can't think of anybody better to help walk us through this process than Charlie Yielding. So Charlie, before we get into that, we don't know you that well yet. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about you and some of your expertise and knowledge and data and why you are now a data ninja.
Yeah. So we did establish last podcast that I'm a data ninja.
That's right. If you didn't listen to that one, please go back and listen to the episode 1.
Absolutely. And I will forever keep that title. So that's happening. So I guess the best way to start is that I have been working with technology and in technology and around technology since the late 90s. In my younger teenage years, I didn't really have any access to computers or internet or anything like that. And so I was just playing basketball, walking in the woods, like enjoying the non-digital life.
Oh, the good old days.
Yeah. So I find myself in a unique position to where a part of my life I got to be data-free, or not data-free, but digital-free. Mm-hmm. And then I transitioned into it. And ever since I got my very first cell phone in 1998, I have been hooked on technology, and more specifically mobile technology. That led to a job where I sold cell phones for many years, and I was getting people these Motorola Peanut phones back in the day. And so I have an understanding about what it takes, or I've had an understanding about what it takes to become a mobile user from the very get-go. Mm-hmm. This is 2001-ish, and so this is pre-iPhone, pre-smartphone. Like, I got to watch the smartphone industry come out of nowhere. And I worked in that retail job until 2008, and then immediately moved up here to Nashville from Mississippi, as I mentioned before.
Okay.
And got a job selling loans, not a technology job. Needless to say, didn't last very long because I can't deal with not being challenged, and technology challenges me every day. And so I actually got the job where I'm at G Squared Wireless in January of 2009. And the whole goal of the job was to support end users with BlackBerry problems over the phone.
BlackBerry. Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah, this is back when BlackBerry was the smartphone, not just a smartphone, but the smartphone.
That's right.
It had beat out Palm already because the government was using it based on how secure it was.
That's right.
And so, you can imagine servers in the mid-aughts and late-aughts. They were really buggy, and so a lot of times we would get calls like I'm not getting my email and things like that. And so I had to learn a lot about what can be captured from a cell phone in order to support people on those cell phones through the technology that existed. And I got to work as the help desk agent for a few years, and then I did, this is a story for a different time, but I really tried hard to grow and was allowed the ability to grow. And in doing so, the sky was the limit. And so I started paying a lot of attention to just the technology industry as a whole. And that's how Google and Apple and Amazon and all those kind of things play with data and around data. And then, Facebook became a big conversation piece, and how they use data with or without consent and all that kind of stuff. And so that was always interesting to me. But I practically applied that day in and day out through my job with mobility.
Gotcha.
And so I've helped enterprise level customers implement mobile strategies around security. And so in healthcare, there's you have to adhere to this thing called HIPAA compliance, which says you can do these things with phones and you can't do these. And so through management platforms, we go in and say, you've got to have a password. Your text messages have to be encrypted. And oh, by the way, you can't sync this information or that information because that breaks these rules. Mm-hmm. And so I've been in the very fortunate position to be on the wave the entire time. And so now, instead of having to learn from the ground up how technology works and how data is captured and all that kind of stuff, I get to just change pieces here and there, which makes my view of the subjects we're going to get into easier to handle because it's a
Yeah.
lot.
And that's where I was going because, obviously I can go back to, pre-internet, definitely pre-cell phone and all that stuff. But I think my journey has been kind of more on the normal side. In other words, data to me was more computers first, and then, I became I would consume information from a phone. But you have a different perspective than the average person because you've been on the mobility side or the cell phone side from day one.
Right. And so I've learned exactly, if not how mobile devices capture information. So it's something we'll get to in a little bit. But it's like I've said this thing out loud, and I know I've never typed it in anywhere, but I still see the ad.
Yeah.
Am I going crazy? And the answer is no, you're not going crazy, because back in 2016, Qualcomm came out with a Snapdragon processor that was efficient enough to run your microphone all the time, to listen.
All right, don't scare people yet.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Let's get there for sure. But I do think this is a topic we have to start with in the beginning, because the capturing, the storing, and the ownership of data is really, really important to know about. If we're trying to empower everybody to understand data, we also have to get them to understand the good use of the capturing of their data.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly important. And I think for the next little bit of time that we have here, going to be very eye-opening.
I hope so, because everybody's got to understand this. And so I guess we can jump into like the capture of data.
Yeah.
And because we didn't miss anything, do I need to credential myself more? I did work my way to CEO. I think I meant to mention that.
Yeah. Oh, I just happened to be a CEO. How do you like that, folks? Yes. And that's enough of you.
Fair enough.
But the more important thing is this is a really cool topic, and let's dive right into it. And so, first of all, folks, we're not going to talk just about phones today. We're talking about data and how it is captured. What are some of the different ways that data is captured?
Well, today, for the sake of the conversation, I want to break it down in two different ways. We've got our analog or our antiquated ways to record data, which is handwriting, to the points you were making earlier, painting, like the things that are not specifically data for data's sake, but can be qualified with data.
Okay.
And then, that's the same thing. It's numbers, words, ideas, all that kind of stuff.
So if I'm typing something into my computer, is that considered the antiquated way as well? Or is that now transitioning over to your other way?
It's a bit of both, because you're literally recording the data on a hard drive. And so it actually is data in the real sense of it. But from the intents and purposes that we're talking about, it's still that more antiquated way to do it.
Okay.
Because the new type of way to capture data is it's all digital. And so there are companies out there creating behavior profiles for you as an individual. And that's where I'm getting at with the digital data.
Yeah.
The new wave and whatnot. And so
now, is that something that does that mean it's automatically generated? In other words, it's from my watch and it's based on that? Or are you talking about anything that's stored digitally is this other sphere of?
It's the newer type of data. Yes.
Okay.
And so that's why writing something down on your computer, it bridges the gap, because there is a physical, like, digital data storage, but then there's also when you're reading it doesn't matter if it's a piece of paper or if it's a computer screen. It's the same thing.
Gotcha.
So to go into like how do we capture digital data? And that's two different modes as well. So we've got the more active ways that we do it, and that's putting information into websites. That's recording your email address or anything like that. So if you've ever done a home loan refinance, especially back in the aughts and whatnot, you're going to lendingtree.com.
Yep.
And lendingtree.com is going to put a cookie on your device, which is where all websites do that, unless you're actively working against it. And then that cookie is going to capture not the information that you enter and then submit, but any character you put in those fields is captured. So if you've ever gone to LendingTree and you put in your email address, they've got you. And if you put in your phone number, they've got you even more, because they can sell that lead for more money because it's got more information, even though you never hit submit.
Oh, now wait a minute. Let's take a step back.
Okay.
What's a cookie?
So a cookie is a little file that lives on your computer or on the advertiser's server, because it's typically advertisers that are doing this, and it records usage and behavioral data.
Okay, so like if I go to the F1 website, I'm a huge F1 fan. F1 is Formula One racing, and I go to that. It asks me if I will accept their cookies, and I say, I want to manage them. And all of a sudden, I get a list of over 50 different advertisers, and I have to unselect every one of them for me to proceed.
Right.
And so basically what you're saying is they're using my information if I choose to go to their website and use their website and give it to all of their advertisers?
You are a commodity at that point, yeah. So they'll take that information and they'll sell it to all the advertisers. These are pre-existing agreements. But then, so do you want to jump into the different types of cookies? Because there's two main types.
I think, sure.
Okay, so there are session cookies, which are an individual website. That's the file that's on your computer.
Okay.
It records the information at that moment. How long you looked at this image, how what you clicked on, and all the information it can capture. Then there's third-party cookies, which are more. To step back on the session cookies, those delete once you're done, like when you leave the website.
Gotcha.
Then you've got third-party cookies or persistent cookies that will stay over a period of time, and they can live on your computer or they could live in the cloud or on the advertiser servers, and they track everything. They track all of your traffic across this website, that website. And so for me, if I'm going to log into Facebook, I'll log into Facebook in a different browser than I use for anything else that restricts cookies completely, because if I let Facebook see what was in, if I use Chrome by default, if I open up Facebook in Chrome, it sees all my other tabs. And if I use anything while I'm still logged in, or even after I've logged out, it gets to see all of that stuff, because that's one of the cookies that they put on there. And so persistent cookies.
So wait.
Yeah.
Got to keep taking a step back. And so folks, you're lucky today. I'm going to be walking through this with you, because I thought there was only two types of cookies, and that would be chocolate chip or oatmeal raisin. And so we have good cookies, we have bad cookies. So is the session cookie something that we're okay with? And then the third party cookies are things that we want to avoid?
That is so. If I were going to make a recommendation right now, that would be it.
Okay.
So session cookies are typically less malicious, because it's typically a website saying, "Hey, I want to know what you're doing on my website, so I can improve my website."
Okay.
And then but they probably still sell some of it because there's a big market for that, because it just generates like advertisers love more data to increase the profile they have for you, and in order to make more money off of you. Because they know if they put that ad in front of you at the right time,
I know,
you're going to spend some money.
So if I click on the running shoe ad, and then for the next 3 months, all I do is get running shoe ads on different websites, there's a reason for that. Yeah.
So the funniest thing that I see on the internet is when somebody who is not savvy about how all this works starts talking and giving themselves away. It's just like
I know exactly what you mean.
It's just like, I don't know why, but on Facebook, all I'm getting are these dirty ads. Beats me why they're there. Do you get them? No, I don't get them. Oh, I don't know why I do. And so like but that kind of goes to the point of that we were making in the first episode, which you should watch or listen to, is that the more complete your knowledge is on this whole subject, the more options you'll have to maneuver through it. So if that person that's telling me that they get the nudie ads and whatnot knew that was based on personal behavior, they would never say that to me. I'd say that they would never. Maybe there's maybe they're not shameful about it or anything like that. But in the situations where I've had those conversations, if they knew what they were telling me, they would not have told me.
So tip number 1 today is if you get ads that probably are not appropriate, don't tell people about it, and clear your cookies.
Yeah, and if you're legitimately not the person that's doing that, somebody in your household is typically.
All right, well, let's get back to where we were, please. And so in the capturing of data, in this case, we're talking about cookies. One last question before we dive into it a little bit deeper is, a lot of times when you get to a website, you'll see that it will say, will you accept required cookies or something else? And so to use that site, you have to accept at least some required or mandatory ones.
Right.
Is that okay to do?
So I typically think that that's a poor move on the website owner's part, because there's no mandate that says that you have to download cookies, except for the fact that that's probably how they built their financial model.
Yeah.
Is like, we require these cookies, so all our traffic is going to give you this information, Mr. Advertiser. Now give us more money.
Yeah.
And so every time you go to a website, you get, like, now especially, now it's a lot more common than it used to be. You get those little pop-ups for the cookies where you used to not at all. And normally when you get those pop-ups, they're not just doing site-based cookies. They're doing the more comprehensive cookies. And there's ways to get around that. Like, I know Firefox, from a security perspective, it allows you to just default manage all your cookies. Like, you can say session cookies are fine, perpetual cookies are not, and it won't let it. But that means there's some websites you can't go to, and that's the website owner's choice.
Gotcha. I know there's some sites I go to that I just stopped using because I could not proceed unless I accepted something. And I'm just like, I just don't want to. It wanted me to turn off my some adware blockers I have, things like that. So we've got into cookies. I know there's so much more to it. So what's other ways that we can capture data?
So going back to the what we've been talking about so far is computers. And so any usage on the computer is a big deal and all that kind of stuff. But computers are typically stationary. They live at your house and all this other kind of stuff. And then in the aughts, it's 07 actually, the first iPhone comes out. And, it wasn't spectacular or fancy in and of itself, compared to phones nowadays. But then you started getting location-based information that really mattered.
Yeah.
Because once you can tie location to those profiles that are being created for you, then the advertisements or the advertisers have to pay a lot more for that information and whatnot. And so nowadays, most of the information captured about us as individuals either comes through, it does come through phones. It's either the phones or the assistants that live in our houses. Like, so I live with Google. Some people live with Alexa. Other people live with Siri.
Yeah.
And Google helps me turn my lights on and off. I set the thermostat and all that kind of stuff. But those devices record everything. The manufacturers record everything. So where you're at, what you're looking at, which browser you're using, all that kind of stuff. And so you're building a set of information almost constantly, or expanding on a set of information almost constantly with the phone you carry around in your pocket. And so something you brought up earlier was like, should you care?
Yep. And
I think that's up to you as the individual, but it's good to get to the point to where you understand exactly how deep it goes. And so, one of the things that I alluded to earlier was like if you say it around your phone or around your digital assistant, is it really listening? And the answer is yes. So in 2016, I believe, there was a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor that was efficient enough with how it worked to support an always-on mic.
Okay.
And always-on mic doesn't mean that it's recording every single thing you say, but it means it's listening for words. And so if you're an advertiser that sells Nike, Adidas, shoes, just think about it as like keywords that it's looking for. So if you say, hey, activation word, because if I say it now, that everybody's phone is going to go crazy.
That's right. Ooh, we got to start doing that.
It's considered rude at this point to do that.
That's true.
There was a point where you could get away with it, but now in 2022, it's not cool.
That's right.
Unless we want to be malicious.
Ahoy, we say ahoy, Siri, and then that shouldn't do it. There you go.
Well, we'll get some feedback on whether it did or not.
That's right.
So you say hey, activation word, and it hears that word because it's listening for it, but it also can listen for any number of
before
words.
that or after. And I think that leads to probably our second topic, which we may not be ready to get into yet, but I don't care that it captures that information unless I know where it's actually being stored. And that becomes where people can make better decisions as well. So I
That's
want to
correct.
make sure that we get everything you want on capturing.
I think that there's a couple more things that to jump into before
Sure.
we get there.
Let's go.
Because there's new things going on now. So this
Okay.
year,
This isn't enough to scare people?
no, well, not necessarily. So this year is the first year that there's a processor that's effectively powerful enough powerful enough or smooth enough, meaning it doesn't drain battery constantly, to do always on camera.
Whoa,
So-
wait. I get that my phone is always listening to me.
Mhm.
You're about ready to tell me that my phone will always be watching me now as well?
Depends. So
Okay.
that's where we're going with the data storage matters a lot more now than it did right before the camera on thing. Because
Yeah.
I say that like because if you're talking about something you've done illegally that you're still within the statutes for or whatever, or the statute of limitations, like if it's being captured by a digital assistant and then it just goes into a hole, then that's fine. But if it's being captured by a digital assistant and then it's being held in case somebody needs to look at you in the future,
Yeah.
like what does it matter then? Or if it goes into malicious hands or hands where it's there's no ethics being applied. And so the always on camera thing, I'm not sure how it's going to shake out in the end, but it's possible now. And so one of the things, kind of to wrap that up, one of the things that I feel like everybody should know is that ever since iOS 14 was released, you have the ability to turn off certain security aspects of your phone. So you can tell this, like the way I use it is I don't have Facebook on my phone at all as an application, and then I do have Instagram, but all of the access is turned off. So no mic, no camera. If I post something to Instagram, it's from taking a picture and then going in and selecting that picture because I don't want Instagram to have access to all of my pictures. Android doesn't do that. And that's a big drawback for me nowadays. And that's one of the reasons I officially switched from being a lifelong Android user to an iPhone user when 14 came out. I always had both phones because being the CEO of a mobile company, you have to show off with your devices basically.
Gotcha.
But my primary was always first it was the Pixels, then it went to Samsung briefly, and then back to the Pixels. But now it's just an iPhone.
Yeah, and you're going to find out that I am, through this, I'm an Apple enthusiast, have been for a long, long time. Going back to the Apple IIe computer back in the 80s, and then I went to a business school, so I used an IBM Aptiva for a while, and maybe a Dell or two, and then went right back to Mac. And so, and I had a Samsung Galaxy, maybe 10, just to try it, and after a year went back to my Apple ecosystem, and
I was about to say,
and it's so beautiful. It works, and it's all good. And I like to try to be creative. All of my data sciencey things works on it, and so I'm good. So I've always been in that area. As we're talking about capturing data, let's break it down into its simplest form. You broke it first into analog and digital. So when we say analog, it's literally you write things down, and that's the capturing of data at that moment. Back in the day, you used to go into your doctor's offices, and there'd be charts sitting in file cabinets everywhere, and that is the capturing of data from the analog side. And we obviously are focusing on the digital side. And the first thing you brought up is more of the personal computer or the web experience.
right.
And that's where we talked about cookies. And then as we start going into mobile devices, I'm assuming we're also talking about any IoT device as well. Is part of that. What are some of is there any differences between a mobile device and, let's say, your watch or anything that is smart enabled?
From the perspective of data?
Capturing of data.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So it's more about how it displays the information and what the tools are. So an IoT device, for instance, which IoT is Internet of Things, And there is a big wave of IoT that's predicted to come alongside 5G, and we're still waiting on that and stuff. But that's just transmitting one stream of data typically. And you can have a more complex IoT device. Like one of our clients uses them in vending machines. And so in a vending machine, rather than have a driver do a complete route, they'll put an IoT device in there that measures the levels on all of the different items.
Okay.
And so they'll only send the driver out when they need to go.
Gotcha.
And then they'll use software to optimize the routes based off of all the IoT reporting, all the IoT devices reporting back in. So a phone obviously has tons and tons of different metrics that it's capturing all the time because it knows where you're at, it knows who you are, it knows what you like, because you're browsing all of that information through there. So everything that's captured in a cookie through your web browser is captured in your mobile device as well, and all the device information.
Gotcha.
That you get with the GPS and stuff nowadays. So then we get into the conversation, and we can transition now into like, well, where does that live?
Yeah. And just, for that, and again, I live in the data world. When I have played with marketing type data, I'm literally looking at an individual. I'm looking at where they were located. I'm seeing the device that they were on. It is kind of scary to see how much information is being captured, even if you're just going about town, and how much it can actually track you that way.
So when you were looking at this, did it tell you where it came from?
Came from as in where? Like the individual?
Like
or
where was the data generated? Like which app captured the data you were looking at, or what device, or
you tell? It probably was from a specific app. Yeah, and whether I knew it or not, it depended on who the client was or person I was working with.
But that wasn't disclosed to you?
Well, it was if I knew that was the company that captured it. So I knew that their app was the one. So I've worked with a couple of people where I helped them with their data. And so I'm looking at their data, and I know that they're the ones that captured it.
Oh.
They also, the whole point of this app was to capture location data along with some other stuff.
Okay.
So I'm trying to, give some specifics without giving away things.
No, that's
but I've also looked at literally marketing data that was pulled because they have a customer database and they want to see some different patterns about them. And so I really don't know in that case probably where it came from, but I do know that those are usually data aggregators that buy it from a bunch of places and then be able to sell it back to folks.
Yeah.
And even if with one of these companies that I was working with, where I was getting their data specifically, they were like, hey, this marketing company wants our data, and they said they can give us all this stuff. I'm like, no, they just want to steal it and sell it to other people. And they just didn't get that with me. But anyways, but in most cases, it was very eye-opening to realize, you're exactly right, you get a pretty clear picture of what somebody is like and doing through the capturing of data on their cell phone.
Yeah. And so one of the big things that you'll hear from people who promote this is like, it's anonymized, you can't tell who's who and all that kind of stuff. And if you apply, like we'll call it typical ethical standards to that, you're right, you can't really.
Right.
But when you see somebody in one spot overnight, every night for a long period of time, you
kind of know where they live. Yeah.
And if you have the ability to do a Google search, you can find out who that person is.
Gotcha. And so then it gets to all of that. So all those different ways that data can be captured about us. And again, today we're talking specifically about the end user here, the person listening to this podcast,
right?
How their data is captured. Really, now I'm sitting here saying, okay, well, I kind of like sometimes when my data is captured, sometimes it's not. But maybe if I find out where it's being stored, I might have a different view of that. So in most cases, all of that data, is it being stored locally and then forgotten in 2 seconds? Or is it stored in this mythical location somewhere?
Yeah, the cloud.
The cloud. Ooh, this cloud.
Yeah.
And everybody knows what the cloud is, right?
Absolutely. Everybody has a perfect understanding of it. Just in case there's one person out there who doesn't, just because they're probably 6 or so.
Clouds are big, fluffy things that are cute and adorable. And if they store our data, that must be good.
And so the way we do it is we point lasers at them. And the lasers digitize the molecules in the cloud.
Gotcha.
But then when we rain, we lose a lot of information.
All right, we're really going down a terrible route there. Okay. But it's not cute and adorable. What is the cloud?
Well,
Well, it is cute and adorable if you like data centers.
So yeah, the cloud is just the cloud is just a collection of computers, and so I want to walk through this in a specific way to kind of build the picture as I understand it.
Okay.
And so, what is a local drive? So a local drive is a hard drive that's in your computer or in your cell phone.
Okay,
So
most of us get that, right?
well, hopefully, but when somebody says something is saved locally, that's what they mean.
Okay.
It's here. It's not anywhere else. Then you've got data centers, which are collections of computers. They're big warehouse. They're literally big warehouses that have stacks and stacks and stacks of computers. It doesn't look like a desktop you have on your desktop, but it could be.
That's right.
They can still mount some of those in there or set them on a shelf and stuff like that. More often than not, you're looking at blade computers, which are it's just a more efficient way to pack a computer into a stack. And a stack is just it looks like those server racks that you see back in old CSI shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, and if you think about a blade, I'm going to try to equate it to something we all know. But if you just take your computer, your laptop, and fold it, and you think about that, looks like almost like a pizza box. Pizza box is a good way of saying that's probably what a blade looks like. So what you're saying is a data center literally is a building, because we never see these data centers.
It's a big warehouse building that has tons of redundancy from a power perspective, a very awesome cooling system because computers get hot. And when they get hot, they run poorly, and a NOC that rivals NASA. And a NOC is it's a room with about 20 TVs and 3 people sitting in there constantly managing the temperature, looking at weather forecasts. Like they'll have big old they'll have the satellite imagery of clouds coming in because they have to be in a position to be up and running 100% of the time, or as close as it can be, because we trust a lot of our perpetual data nowadays to the cloud. And so from data centers, we can transition straight into cloud because the cloud is the collection of data centers, or is a collection of data centers. It can be one data center depending on the company and what they're loading into the cloud and stuff like that. It can be one computer for all intents and purposes. Like my, well, not mine because I've got an iPad, but your computer could be a part of the cloud. And so data centers will put together a series of computers. And so if you think about Microsoft Azure or AWS or anything like that, which is how websites are hosted and whatnot.
So AWS is Amazon Web Services. So anybody that ever hears how Amazon does all this cloud stuff, that's what AWS is.
Yeah. And so you can build websites in AWS and then Amazon charges you for the usage to your website, but it's just living on a connected series of computers that I guess it's called DNS routing. My engineer friends are going to get mad at me if I misspeak on that. Yeah. But that's how it finds the specific spot it's going towards. But the cloud is just a series of computers. That's the easiest way to think about it.
Yeah,
and
of connected computers.
Connected computers. And they take their uptime very seriously because data is mission critical for life.
So a local drive is probably just a hard drive on either your computer or your phone. If it's going up into the cloud, the first part of that is there's probably a data center that's a physical location. And by the way, you normally don't see these physical locations on purpose. They don't want you to know where they are. So there'll be a warehouse that you have no idea what happens in there, and it's just this big old data center. I can think in my hometown where I currently live, which is Murfreesboro, Tennessee, there is an enormous data center, and nobody knows it's there. So there's a data center. It's this big building. It's being cooled. It cares about its power and its connectivity to the internet. And so it's probably got all these cables coming to it, what are called T1 lines, all that kind of good stuff. But the connection to other data centers is usually what makes up a cloud environment.
Yeah, cloud environment, co-location, like however you want to say it, it's redundancy inside data. So the reason you have data center on the West Coast and the Midwest and on the East Coast communicating all the same stuff is because if one goes down, you've got the other two still there. Because again, the infrastructure of the internet needs to be maintained at this point. Because if you look at the dispersion of like tech jobs that require the internet in the United States versus what it was 20 years ago. It's like we wouldn't know what to do. My job wouldn't exist for sure.
Yeah.
And I imagine as a data person, your job would be hard pressed to exist as well.
I would agree. And so all of these terms, all this, let's break it down into simple with an example. Let's start with some activity on my phone, and whatever I'll let you drive the ship on what you want that to be. But something I trigger data being stored or captured on my phone. What would be a good example? I'm doing a certain app.
So is it active or passive?
Assume it's active.
So if it's active, you're just going into Amazon and you're searching for some shoes.
Gotcha. Perfect. We're looking up my running shoes, right?
Yep.
And so we're on Amazon and I put in running shoes and I hit search. What happens next?
So once you do that, Amazon, like there's the road fork, so to speak. So Amazon takes that search and applies that to your profile.
Okay.
And then that just goes into a long list of data that you've already given them actively. And the passive piece is like the stuff you typed into the search part goes into a cookie, and then Amazon can take that data. They can actually take both sets of data based off the end user license agreement or EULA that you've signed with them, and they can do whatever they want with it. So we'll just say that they keep it on their side first, and so it immediately goes to live in the cloud, because once something is done on the internet nowadays, it's safe to assume that it's in the cloud.
Okay, if it's in the cloud, does that mean it lives on one cloud or in one data center?
It's in multiple. A company like Amazon would definitely have multiple.
Yeah. And I think that's important for everybody to know is the minute you know that your data is being stored in a cloud, that means there are multiple versions or duplicates of it.
It's safe to say that if something is captured in the cloud these days, like so nowadays you do your cell phone backups, so that's another active way to save data. You back something up to the cloud, it's not going away. Like I've talked to people before that don't have a long-term idea of data, and I'm here, like that's what I want to get across today. It's like once it's captured, it's there. There could be, life-threatening events like huge gamma ray bursts from the sun that could wipe out a lot of that stuff. But without a phenomenal event, your data is going to be persistent. And so you're going to be 90, and you're going to have all the data that you've started to collect from, the early aughts and whatnot. And it's going to be there for you. And so we'll be able to look at high-definition versions of ourselves while we're younger. And we're one of the only generations where almost every single person in society gets that opportunity, because they're not going to go away. Because I back up, like I guess from a photograph perspective or a video perspective, like we're still in kind of the middle ground, because a lot of people do save photos and videos locally on their phone, but I don't. I have mine backed up in multiple places and a physical copy.
I do too. Yeah,
because I don't want to lose it. That's the most important thing to me, and so I build redundancy myself into that. Because I have a lot of faith in, the data servers that are backing it up, like we were talking about earlier, the cloud and whatnot, but just in case.
Gotcha. And so let's go back to my running shoes, and I hit search and get my good thing, my good recommendations on certain ones. I make a purchase, maybe I don't. I enjoy my experience when I'm on Amazon's website, and I also like that when I come back next time, it gives me recommendations based on my searches.
If you don't make a purchase. So if you don't make a purchase, they're going to go so what they're going to do is they're going to say, "Hey Nike, we got somebody for you." They're on the hook. They spent 25 seconds looking at this specific shoe. They clicked through 8 different images of it, and that we're almost sure that they want to use this. And then, then Nike can say, okay, well, all of this stuff is set up just by default, but at some point somebody had to say this, like, okay, well, send them the ads.
Gotcha.
And then but it's not just Amazon. It can be whoever Amazon shares that information with. So Facebook could also get that information. If they give it to Nike, then it's whoever Nike has the relationships with and says, okay, go after this individual.
Gotcha. And but also, if I did buy those pair of shoes, will I start getting things like, shorts and running socks and things like that?
Yeah. And you probably get more shoes too, but you would get less than you would otherwise if it's fine tuned. Because there's some advertisers that you think about it. Think about the quality of your information determines the cost of that information, and so some people aren't going to pay top dollar. They're gonna do the, like, even if they bought shoes, they were looking at shoes, and so I'm gonna send them shoes regardless. And so it's just like they're blanketing more, but then there's high end, high cost targeted ads that are like, in this moment, we're here. And, and then this action was taken. So what are we going to do next? And so all of that information lives on the Amazon side. And then depending on, what it says in their EULA, and it's whoever you're dealing with, really, they can then share or sell your information as they see fit. And there are some rules that they have to adhere to. Like they can't say, typically they can't say Charlie Gilding did this. They're like, user whatever did this, and here are his AKAs and stuff like that. Gotcha. Or like, we're not consistent across the U.S. on how all that's handled. And so it's hard to say exactly what, where the line is, for me at least right now. But that as the conversation goes on, we should have a clearer idea of like how all that stuff's handled, because Europe is about, at this point, we'll call it about a decade ahead of us with regards to data privacy and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay. So Europe has a I got to look it up, because it's the General Data Protection Regulation. Yeah. I always forget that because we just always call it GDPR. Yeah. Which is a set of rules that says like, here's how data is treated, and here are the end user's rights essentially with that.
So again, I get targeted ads, and for a lot of people, they'll be like, I do not want that. A lot of people are kind of happy that they get targeted ads because it creates a better experience. It's kind of like going into a store and you say, I like to run. And so then, you need these 3 things. Mm-hmm. That's the online experience. If I like that, why should I care?
So that's one of the things that's more subjective these days. It's like, the way I measure that question for myself is, do I trust the people that I'm giving the information to? Okay. So for me, I've used Google for long enough now that if anybody knows anything about me, it's Google. And so, because I started using Google Now when that first was released, and that was their first attempt at like, hey, we've been collecting this information from you. Would you like to see a picture of it? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so
that was called Google Now.
Google Now. That's they don't call it that anymore. That's right. But so Google Now, it was my first experience with that kind of live feedback. And so I started noticing it because I was using a Pixel phone at the time, or maybe it was what was before the Pixel?
It's a Google phone. Again, I'm an Apple guy.
It's just because I'm here.
Yeah.
So it's I started using it, and I used to go to the gym at 8:00 Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Yeah. And it learned that, and then it's at 7:30. It was just like, hey, it's time to go to the gym.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Siri kind of does that a little bit here or there too. And my fancy car does that to me as well. It'll assume I'm going to work, and so it automatically just starts routing me there.
Yeah. So there are ease of use conditions in which it's totally fine. But it all comes down to do you trust them? So that there's a reason I don't have the Facebook app on my phone, and I don't give Instagram any kind of access to anything that's not what I directly give it. And then TikTok's the same way. Like TikTok's the big conversation these days, because that takes an extra step into how much should I trust an entity with my data, and where are they, and what is their intent? And so like TikTok is has stated to us before as Americans that our information does cross international lines, but it would only go to Singapore. And then later come to find out that Chinese officials can access that data. So even though they weren't lying to us, they were not being 100% truthful with it. But then if you go through the EULA for TikTok, they explicitly say what they're doing. And so they capture everything they possibly can. They're going onto your phone and looking at file names. They're looking at your app usage. They're looking at as much as they possibly can. And they're creating biometric conditions for you. So they've got your face print and they've got your voice print. And so if you use a new iPhone with the face unlock, they've got a LiDAR image of your face.
TikTok does.
And then by proxy, China does. And so I've heard people talk about, well, like, I don't care. It's no big deal. It's whatever. But then if you think about some of the youngins that are on TikTok and like how, and this is, we're going to get into this a lot more in the future, but like how usage works nowadays with youngins and what they've been taught about, like, don't take pictures that you shouldn't be taking, or don't do this, or, you know, like they're not being properly tooled up to understand that every bit of the things that they do could be used against them at some point in their life. Like, I realize that. And it's, you know, it's a discipline to maintain that, because I try not to do things that I would regret later. But if I did, then I'm just going to accept the fact that it's going to happen. Yeah. And it could come up at any point in time. And so if you think about influence from external sources, say somebody's running for office and China takes issue to that, they could release everything they have on them. And so if you've done some weird stuff in TikTok, you just got to deal with it.
What if I want to take down all my fancy dance moves that I've put on TikTok and I just erase my account? I'm good, right?
Do you live here in Tennessee?
I live here in Tennessee.
No.
Oh, wait. So, not saying that I'm really good at the flossing thing or something like that, or all my, you know, and again, I don't even have a TikTok account because I already knew this stuff, of course.
Sure.
But so if I delete my account and I erase everything, it's not gone?
No.
Oh.
So earlier we were talking about it, once it goes to the cloud, it lives in the cloud. But the way data ownership works nowadays, here in the U.S., except for California, but you have to be a California resident for this to apply.
Okay.
The data is not yours, and you have no control over it. So you can delete things. Like, so if I wanted to delete my Facebook profile, I could delete it, and so that access would stop. But Facebook has everything ever put on it, and they will continue to have everything they put on it because they realize the power of data, because they monetize data in that kind of way. And so they're not going to get rid of it, because historical data is just as important as data now, because in some point the data now is going to be historical, and we're just going to be a part of an ongoing line graph, or whatever you want to call it.
And as we talked about in episode 1, the ability to predict something is based on the past and usually other people's experiences. So by getting rid of any data, you're getting rid of better opportunities to make predictions as in like what you are willing to buy, or you're willing to see or do, all of those things. So keeping that data makes sense. So we've captured data, we've stored it, and you might have some more to tell us about storing, but I'm already afraid enough. Who owns it in most cases?
So when you initially sign that end user license agreement, or EULA, or terms of services, or whatever you want to say or call it, that's you giving the company the right to your data. And so I use the term your data because I believe myself that we as individuals should have not only control over our data, but we should be able to receive our data.
Okay.
Now, we're not there yet as a culture, because there's no piece of software or no way I can ingest the data that I create in the same way that a company could with their, because it takes a lot of money to get all this stuff going. And AI has been a big help in getting all of this stuff to where it is. But I firmly believe that we will get to a point to where the conversation is about how I receive my own personal data for using it in the ways that I see fit, not the ways a company sees fit. Now, I don't know if that looks like, they keep a copy and I've got a copy, and then I can request they delete their copy, or what. But we're not there because right now I don't get a choice at all. I can say, Facebook, delete my stuff, and they're like, you live in Tennessee? No.
Yeah.
If you live in Europe, yes, because GDPR requires that a company follow a specific process to delete that information.
Gotcha.
I personally don't like the idea of deleting years worth of information about myself for any reason whatsoever. But I want to have it because it's mine. It's
not like there's this personal data repository somewhere in the cloud that all these companies are being gracious enough to put my information in just in case I ever wanted it at some point.
Yet,
but wouldn't that be great? And that does make a lot of sense, so that you would actually have control of your data. So when we say data in this case, we're talking about activity. If it's based on your mobile device, it could be your pictures, it could be your location, it could be your social media posts, it can be all of that stuff. There's more to data than just, what lives on your phone, of course. What about in terms of like healthcare and things like that? So when I do go to the doctor, they're capturing my information. They are storing my information. They don't give me a copy. Does that mean they own my health data as well?
I don't. So that gets into a weird spot because there are HIPAA.
HIPAA's about who you can give it to.
Yeah, but I don't know if it controls anything over if. I don't actually know the answer to that question.
Well, and it's okay that we don't know everything about data. And so I have a little bit more experience in that because a lot of my data projects, even though I'm not dying to always do healthcare, when you're in Nashville, you're doing healthcare.
Yeah.
And so in most cases, when it seems like, and I've seen a lot of data behind the scenes, companies act like they own your data, but in a more ethical way. Mm-hmm. Like they're not giving that to everybody. Because of HIPAA and other safeguards put in place. But do they internally use it for good, right?
Yeah.
Because it's about hopefully making it so you're not sick. And believe it or not, I believe that most hospitals and people in healthcare prefer you not to be sick. I really do believe that, as I've talked to so many data folks. Mm-hmm. They are using our data. They are, yeah. And now can they give it to other people? No, that's why you're signing those things off, except in certain cases, obviously for you're giving the right to do it in mm-hmm. a lot of cases. So I think it is a little bit different. I think it is important, but I do think for me to get that data from my, first of all, I don't know how. I don't know where it is. I don't know who has what. It's an incredibly intimidating thing to think I want to have all of my personal health data from the 18 different places I've gone.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even know where to start.
I think the easiest answer to that is you'd have to go to each one of those places and request your information, and then you would have to manually enter it into the centralized location, because the healthcare industry in general right now is they're dealing with the need to move all of their systems to the cloud, to where the data lives in the cloud, but they've got what we call in the industry a lot of legacy systems, like applications that were built to handle EMRs or electronic medical records in the late 90s or early aughts that sit on a physical server somewhere in the organization that they can't load into the cloud because the framework's not the same. And there's newer technologies that are allowing more uploading of those legacy apps and stuff, but those legacy apps are more like spreadsheet, like 1999 website looking type things. And the way they communicate with other systems is just not up to date is the easiest way to say it, meaning they can't. And so everything you get from them is just a raw data pool. It's just like, I'm just taking all this information from this platform, and then I've got to set it up in a way that matches with the other data. And that's a manual process, mm-hmm. unless you've got some sort of automation methods to do that, which it happens, especially in big business and healthcare, because they spend a lot of time working with data. Yeah. And in the healthcare area, you can give data.
Mm-hmm. You can give data to other sources, but it has to be aggregated, and it has to be aggregated at a level that cannot bring it back to somebody. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I have a project right now where we're looking at disparities within neighborhoods in terms of healthcare, and specifically hypertension. So we're trying to see in Nashville where the highest pockets of risk are mm-hmm. in terms of high blood pressure, which we know leads to other things like diabetes and things like that. So I can get data, but I can get it aggregated at the different levels: U.S. Census Tract, zip code level, city level, but it has to be 11 or more individuals aggregated together. So there's no way for me. The general rule is as mm-hmm. long as there's 11 or more in an aggregation, I can't pinpoint it back to somebody. But if I was looking at zip codes and there was one person from zip code 37555, I can get back to that person by mm-hmm. finding out who has hypertension in that zip code, and now I've pinpointed that person. Mm-hmm. So that is being done. I know that's being done, but I think there's a little bit more care in how that's being done because of federal regulation, where on the mobile side and the computer usage side, it's not to that same level.
No, not even close.
Yeah.
Like, so finance has a lot of regulation around
Right.
data, and healthcare does, and there are a couple other industries and whatnot. But for the most part, it's the wild, wild west right now.
Yeah.
It's like who knows or even understands it on the Hill, like what's being captured and how it's potentially being used, because we've all seen the senators ask the Google CEO why their iPhone was messing up.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't describe, like, or if that's not a perfect example of like where we are on the data conversation, I don't know what is. Because then, again, that's the whole point of why we decided that this is a really good thing to be doing, because it's time we all know all this stuff, and it's time we understand like how it is. And to come back to your original question, if you decide that it's okay, like if you still want to use TikTok, as long as you know what TikTok's doing and you're fine with it,
Yeah.
who cares? But do think to yourself, will I care for any reason in 10, 15, or 20 years, or any point in the rest of my life that my data is out there and accessible?
So now I know that data is captured, where data is being stored. I don't own it, or if I do own it, it's almost like a co-ownership. It sounds like in almost every case.
It's never co-ownership right now. You even under GDPR, the only thing you can do is request it to be deleted. And if you say co-ownership is in like you can download stuff to your hard drive,
Yeah.
but you're not really going to capture the same section or selection of information that they have, because they've got so much more that they don't show you.
So they own it. I sometimes can see it.
You can
or view
access it.
I have access. They own it. That's eye-opening. I mean, and you do see that. Like I now have a portal with my doctor. And so now I do see my last 10 years of physicals in there. And so, which is nice to see that. But I can't see if I went to a different doctor in there, because they're not part of the same system, which I think that right now is just where we are with things, And so, yes, if I go to the ER, they're not going to know who I am, because they're not going to be able to get that, that's frustrating, right?
Oh, yeah.
And if I owned my own data and I had the ability to just show it to people, I think that's where people would like to be, as opposed to thinking that other people have to share my information. No, I should own it. It should be in my wallet. And we're so far away from that.
I feel like it where we sit right now, it does feel like we're really far from that, but I don't think it's as far as what we're used to growing, living our lives to this point. Because like I said, we used to be on cycles that were a lot longer. Like if you think about it from a mobile perspective, because I can always tie something to mobility. Like in the very beginning, it changed a lot, because there was like everybody was jumping in at the same time, and then it kind of normalized in certain areas. And so we got on a 2-year cycle where most people would buy a phone, they would keep it for 2 years, they would get a new phone. And BlackBerry helped out with that a lot, because it was the first smartphone, but they would only have a new phone every few years. And then they wouldn't even do OS updates on a regular basis. Like you would get a new phone and same old operating system. Well, then comes along Apple in 2007. And then around the same time, T-Mobile's, they're bringing the Hero and I forget what the other keyboard one was, but they brought a couple of Android phones over. And then from that point, we started getting used to like the speeding up of the change.
At least once a year, we feel like there's a new software or hardware.
Yeah, and so with Apple specifically, because they control the whole thing, you get at least one new phone every single year, and you get a new OS update. So you go from 14 to 15 and 15 to 16. And stuff like that. And then on the PC side, it was the same way. It was really slow, but now it's starting to pick up, because now that everything's more subscription based, because the software nowadays lives in the cloud, so you can update it a lot more regularly. Like change is happening. So we're one step away from a company building the framework to be able to ingest the data, and then we're one societal decision away from making that a norm.
Wow. Yeah. And as dire as we make it sound, it's also pretty fun to think about how data has enhanced our lives, and the capturing, storing, and ownership of data is sometimes good too. So let's not think about that. And the true power of data in most cases isn't a single data point. It is when data is, of course, integrated with other data, and we understand that. And as we start to look at, we're going to definitely talk about data for good in a lot of the things that we do, not just data being evil, and we don't believe that, but data is being used to make better decisions, and companies are using it, obviously, to give you a better experience is probably the way that they would portray that. And that's a lot of times is the case, and that's okay. But are you comfortable with that? And I think that's what we wanted to kind of open your eyes to today is, folks, just know, just be armed with the information, and then you make your decision.
Yeah.
Are you okay with somebody else owning your activity from your phone? If not, then don't sign that end user license agreement as you download the app.
But that's restrictive though. So we're essentially so for me, I think that if some of the choices I make about what I do and don't interact with on the internet limits my ability to do stuff. Because we were having this conversation earlier that right now TikTok is blowing up, and if you're going to try and do something on social media, that's the place to be.
Right.
But we both believe that being on TikTok goes past where we're personally comfortable with.
Right.
And that's our choice. But I don't think that that's something that we should go, you use TikTok? I can't believe you would use TikTok. Why do you do that? You're stupid. That's not what we're trying to say at all. Well, it does come back to, do you know what's being captured, and are you cool with it? Great. And if not, then just stop using it. But know that when you stop using stuff, you're essentially alienating yourself, or you're building up the potential for FOMO or whatnot.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be a byproduct, because there's plenty of times where I'm just like, man, I wish I could just make this easier on myself. Because it's like anytime I post something to Instagram, it's like a 5-step process, because I got to go find the picture and select it to allow it and all this other kind of stuff. But it's a limitation I put on myself because I want to stand behind what I believe.
Yeah. And obviously there's also the difference between Apple and Android in terms of phones. And Apple probably does more processing on the phone than an Android device does. Like most of the Android device applications go to the cloud to do the processing, which means it has to store that data somewhere and then come back to your phone. It's not that the Apple device only does things on the phone only and never shares, but I think, the perception of Apple being a little bit more secure or private than Android, do you feel that is a fair assumption?
I think the easiest way to say it is we don't know, because we don't know. So what we do know is that on the Android devices, you can't restrict in the same way you can in iOS. And so one of my favorite things to say is that, or to share, is that Facebook or Meta lost billions of dollars in revenue when iOS shut off the ask for permission stuff. When iOS 14 came out, and that became the reality for iPhone users, billions of dollars, because there's so much information that they were gleaning off of people's devices that it was just happy day for them. So I feel like that conversation is fair, except for the fact that we don't know exactly what Apple does, because in traditional fashion, Apple does everything behind the wall. And so they're not telling you what they're doing with their data. They're they're not showing you what they're doing with the data, but they're telling you, trust us, it's in the EULA, if you've read all 56 pages or however long it is, what we're doing with it.
Yeah.
But then you get into the ethical side of things. And so I trust the Google, or I trust that Google does what they say they do with my information, but would I be, am I married to them, so to speak? And the answer is no. So if it turns out that they're doing something, if they are being unethical with my data or doing things with it that compromise me in ways that I'm not comfortable with, then I'll stop using it altogether. I'll switch the browser I use. I'll switch I'll no longer carry an Android phone, period, and all this other kind of stuff. But I'm willing to change the behavior, whereas somebody else may just be I don't care. It's fine.
So understand where your data is, or how your data is being captured, where it is being stored, and who owns it, just makes you a better informed person. Again, we want you to think different with data, and for you to be able to think different with data, you should understand the capturing, the storing, and the ownership of your data to make better informed decisions on what you should or should be comfortable with. And a lot of people are just going to say, you know what, I'm good with it. What a big deal they have my pictures. Big deal they knew I bought that one thing. As long as they don't have my tax, my social security number, which they probably do, but as long as I don't get fraudulent things against me, I'm pretty much okay. That's okay. We're not saying you have to be one way or the other. I am probably more on I'm willing to give my stuff out so I get personalized stuff back, as opposed to locking everything down. I think that's more the data guy in me, as opposed to, like, I used to teach security and I was never good at it because I was like, who cares about the security thing? And of course I do care. But I think I've always been more on the data for all idea, which literally means data for all. In that case, as opposed to keeping everything locked down. But I think that's a personal choice. And our objective today, I think, was just to arm people with the information they need to make the right choice.
Yeah, that's exactly what the intent was, because we're not getting into the big conversations today, more just the information. So to echo your point, like, we can make the best choices possible.
Well, I think we did accomplish that today. Charlie, your knowledge in this area is just fantastic. And hopefully we were able to bring it down to a good, relatable aspect of our everyday lives. I know I feel like I've learned something today, and I'm supposedly the data guy, but it's really hard to understand all of this. It's just a lot. And hopefully, again, I think what you were able to share with us today, it might scare people a little bit, but I just feel better informed.
Yeah. And so for anybody who wants to know more about this, we're going to include a lot of links in the description for this podcast.
Great.
That'll take you to a really good website that has all the information you could ever want to know about cookies, GDPR. There's another one for GDPR. There's another one for the TikTok backdoor. There's all of this stuff is, if you want to dig deep, like, there's definitely ways to do that. And
I've even seen the videos that show you how to turn things off on your phone. If we find a couple of those folks, we'll even share those with you as well, because I think that would be really important. And so, last parting shots. I like to simplify life for myself. And so, I have the hard line. Yes or no? Am I sharing data? Am I not? But my main goal is to live in a way that I don't care who has my data in the end, because it's not going to impact my life. I think that's a good way to end it. Charlie, thank you again. Like I said, I think we've all got a little bit more out of this. So I feel like we're armed a little bit better to understand where our data is and where it is going. And I think that'll set us up for our next few episodes. Yeah, I agree. So with that, thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time.